Welcome to LCRL's Liberty Alert in Washington, D.C. with your host, Dr. Gregory Seltz. Talking two kingdom citizenship, bold biblical principles for a robust public Christian life. And now, your host, Dr. Gregory Seltz.
Hello, hello, hello. Merry Christmas to all of you out there today. I hope you're having a great week. May this be the best Christmas ever. We've been talking a little bit about that, and I really do think that it can be. You know, it's interesting. The Christmas star, like we've been trying to go out every night to see it, and they're saying that this phenomenon of Jupiter and Saturn, I think, together are forming an alignment and making this bright star in the sky kind of thing. And I just thought it was oddly interesting, again, that this phenomenon, which they say happened 800 years ago, is happening just this year, when it seems that all kinds of things, seem dark. In fact, our president-elect, using that term, I know there's still craziness going on in the election, but he said, our darkest days are ahead of us. Now, there's a leader for you. Anyway, it was just amazing to me because in this moment when a lot of things that we cherish in this country are just being set aside or put on hold or destroyed or all kinds of things, I think the Christmas star shines even more brightly. So the light of Christ, don't despair. The light of Christ shines even more brightly in the darkness. And so my title today, it was meant to be provocative. And, you know, I'm sure there's some people saying, how can you say that? Is America a Christmas Christian nation? I'll go even further. I'll even say that Christmas created this culture. How about that? People are saying, how can you say that? That's not true. Well, metaphorically, philosophically, the foundation of our church-state differentiation and all the things that we cherish, the idea that we should live in liberty and in freedom, and that the government shouldn't be in control of our lives because there's a higher authority in our life, all these things flow from a Christian worldview. But as we're going to talk about in just a minute, so if I say, is America a Christian, Christmas Christian nation? And I changed the title, by the way, because I wanted to even go a little bit more provocatively on that. Well, the answer is kind of yes and yes. It's definitely not no, but I think it was, it was described this way one time, that America is incorrigibly Christian. I like that. And so, you know, that's kind of what we'll get to in just in a little bit. But biblical two-kingdom theology can answer that question. And if you're not Christian, you're going to understand why it's an incredible thing to live in this kind of nation, because the Christian worldview is very tolerant when it comes to the left-hand kingdom common rule of civility. There are common morals that we all share, and we can execute those things to the best of our ability. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. Governments aren't Christian. That's the point. People are. Okay, and governments also aren't grace, mercy, and peace organizations in terms of the peace of the soul type of thing. And that, I think, is the problem today. There are a lot of people with way too much faith in government. And then we'll talk about some of that in a minute. So again, thanks again for listening with us today. We come to each week trying to talk about how Christian two-kingdom citizenship is a powerful, joyful way of living life, no matter what is going on in the culture in which we live. And we want to live our lives boldly for the sake of our culture. Even if the culture disagrees with us, we still want to live for the sake of the culture and obviously for the sake of the mission of the church. And so again, is America a Christmas Christian nation? What kind of question is that, Pastor? And why ask that right now? Well, we'll get to that in just a minute. Our week in review, I'm just going to go through it. The COVID-19 thing, the relief package is out, but as I've said before, if there's one thing, if you just look at this stuff honestly, of course, a lot of us right now could use the money. I mean, obviously, I know there are people whose businesses are being destroyed. I know families who are worried about what's coming next. I get all that. But when the answer is, I hope the government gives us money, man, we're really in dire straits. And then look at how much money they finally give after all of after all of this. People will get $600. I know Trump wants $2,000, but what does it matter? The problem is they shouldn't be giving us money. They should be allowing us to go back to work and take care of our families and provide for each other. There's no way they can replace what our vocations are meant to give to us and to our families. And gosh, we just have so many people thinking, well, I hope they give us something. What's really interesting, if you look at what's in this bill, and there's one good thing in the bill, they're going to actually allow us, in your taxes, if you give to charity, they're going to get in, and you also don't file a Schedule A, they're going to allow you to write off $600 as opposed to $300. And I'm like, wow. Why don't you just let us write off what we give to charity and let us become a charitable nation again, not a tax and spend nation again? Okay, that's another show. But again, when you look at this and you see, if there's ever this is an argument. This is a great argument for why liberty is to be cherished more than security, and why handing over your lives to the government is always going to be a bad thing in the end for you and for your family. When you think about it, they still take all the tax money in. The schools are taking all the property tax money, and they're not providing what they're taking the money for. Now, what business could survive by taking your money for months on end and then at the end giving you back $600? Oh, and by the way, they're going to tax you again to get that money back. Okay. Don't doubt me on that one. So again, I know I know for those of you who really, really need the money, I know this is some welcome relief, and God bless you. But man, we've got to get back to a place where we can allow the Lord to provide for us through our vocations and through our work. We don't want these folks to be in charge of that. The whole Robin Hood thing, the whole Robin Hood story, people tell you, take from the rich and give to the poor. No, it's take from the government rich guy who took all your money and give it back to the people. That was the story. Anyway, and then if government does start to control things, chances are, if you didn't vote for them, you aren't going to get the goodies. I hate to say that. That's kind of the new, they call it crony capitalism of our culture today. We're against that kind of thing. We're hoping that we can get back to a more fair, equitable kind of thing where the government they're like the referees. They don't play the game. But you're starting to see this with COVID-19. They start picking and choosing who they want to open, who they don't want to open, and they start punishing people who didn't vote for them. And that's when politics, again, gets out of its lane and becomes very detrimental. And we're seeing it even in the COVID relief vaccination stuff. It's outrageous that they're politicizing the vaccine. We should be asking the question, who is most vulnerable to this virus, and then give them the vaccine first. That should be the priority. Well, I don't know if you've seen this, but some of these political types are coming out saying, no, most elderly people are white, so therefore they shouldn't get it. One guy factored in, he said that'll cause 6,000 more deaths a month. It's outrageous. But no one was outraged when Cuomo sent, COVID-19 people back to nursing homes, which probably killed more elderly folks, since they're the most vulnerable. No one was outraged. I didn't see anything on all the news shows at all. In fact, I think he won an Emmy for his handling of all these things. And I just laugh and I go, they keep telling us, oh, we're going to do what's right. We're going to do what's right for everybody. No, they politicize everything. And so this should outrage every American. I don't care what side of the aisle you're from. Most elderly are white. That's their criteria for not giving the COVID-19 thing. Well, most poor are white too. And I don't want to get into the whole discussion of that, because this doesn't mitigate, this doesn't say racism doesn't exist or any of these things. But again, just watch what happens when the politics gets in the way of things. And we should try to depoliticize things. That's ultimately my message to today. Give it to the most vulnerable. And by the way, I hear that Black people are most vulnerable to this virus, so they'll get it first, but as well as the elderly, because they're the absolute most vulnerable people. Give it to the people who are in need most. The spirit and the message of Christmas is something we need more right now to overcome the crisis of this pandemic, the politics of destruction, the flaunting of the rule of the law, the secularization of our culture, and the need for forgiveness and love to be in all of the middle of this. So today, that's why I want to talk again about, is America a Christian nation? How about, let's say, is America a Christmas Christian nation, and why that's good news for everybody. So let's start with that. I'm going to say it this way. Christmas created this country. Yeah, I'm going to get it for that because, I know historically none of the founding fathers are saying, hey, I'm motivated to go to write the Constitution because of Christmas. Well, yeah, not that directly, but let me just tell you, the Christmas child, go hang in there with me on this. The Christmas child, Jesus, this is what he said. Ready? He said, when they brought to him an image of a coin, he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. And they were amazed at this because they thought they had trapped him. They thought that he was going to say, give money to this Roman government, and then they could say he's not being very religious. And then if he said, don't give money to the Roman government, then they could say he's not very patriotic, and they were going to get him either way. And he said, no. But notice what he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. But later, when he's before Pilate, he said, listen, because Pilate said, look, I have the authority to kill you, man. These are paraphrases now. This is in John 18. But Jesus said, you would not have authority over me if it were not given to you. And the point is, God even has a role for Caesar to play. So Caesar can't get out of his lane. It's not like Caesar in his realm can do whatever he wants. And that's kind of what we're in D.C. right now fighting for. We're just saying, Caesar, get back in your lane. You're out of your lane, way out of your lane. And then the last one, where Jesus again in John 18 says this. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the leaders, but my kingdom's from another place. And then what's interesting to me is when he's having this conversation with Pilate, Pilate says, you're a king. And he said, well, yes, you're right in saying that I was born to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me. And then here comes Pilate's very postmodern point. What is truth? And then he washes his hands of the whole thing. So again, a lot of the themes that are going on in our culture today, we got the secular pietist Grinches trying to take away, Christmas by saying, what is truth? Yeah, I get that. Very, very. So we've got a lot to say about this. And I do believe that the Christmas child who differentiated the role of church and state, he's the one who did it. If you're a person who believes that the government has a role in our lives and it should be radically different than the church or the spiritual religious organizations that are free to do good for others, if you believe in that, then I hate to tell you this, but that's the Christmas Christian view of what culture and church should be. So, we're very clear. Governments cannot be Christian. And so if someone said, is this a Christian nation? If you're talking about the government, well, governments can't be Christian because the message of Christianity is ultimately the free gift of salvation that comes by grace through faith in Jesus. The free gift that God himself gives. No government can coercively give that to you. And this is why I keep telling people the government is a coercive organization. It doesn't take offerings. Offerings are free gifts. When you go to church, you give an offering. Offerings are free gifts, and then the church pools its free gifts and tries to put those things to work in our lives. Governments don't ask for offerings. In fact, like I said, I just paid more quarterlies. And, in the middle of this pandemic, you would think maybe the government would say, since we're not doing very much for you, maybe keep some of your money. No, they want the same amount of money every year. The only time they take less is if I run out of money. and I don't make any money, then they might not tax me. It's crazy to think about that. So again, to think that they're a benevolencing organization. No, governments can't be Christian. That message comes by grace through faith in Christ alone, through his church. But the government has a role in our life. So if you believe in that differentiation, the word separation is bad because it applies that there's no overlap. Well, there's moral overlap in those discussions. But morality doesn't save us. Only the good news of the gospel saves us. So two kingdom citizens, we can understand this. And we can actually say, yeah, that Christmas Christian message, that actually is what undergirds our Constitution. It's what is fundamental to our Declaration of Independence. And folks, this country's freedoms compared to all other countries' freedoms, there are still people coming from all over the world to this place because of what is provided here. And I think there's a war on Christianity by what I would call the secular pietists or the secular progressives, because they think they can have everything without this allegiance to God. Well, France already tried that, and it doesn't work when the government takes the place of God in your life. So again, when we start to think about this, governments aren't Christian, people are. And that's, again, because the Christian worldview differentiates the role of the church and the state. So the danger, and this is where I think on this day, we should be thinking about the danger of when governments try to merge the church and the state. When you start hearing people say, we're going to take money from these people and give it to these people because, Matthew 25 says that we should give to the poor. No, Matthew 25 and Matthew, all the verses about the Bible talking about giving to the poor are people individually, freely giving to the poor. They're not undergirding government's role to take from some people and give to other people. That would be a mistranslation, and that would actually be merging the role of the church and the free citizen with the state. And every time that happens, the church and the free citizen are extinguished in culture. You don't want that. Even if you are a secular progressive, you do not want this. Trust me, if you really look at history honestly, you will see that the statist movements that are in history always destroy people's individual rights in the name of this pathetic security, which is finally the minimalist security that governments will provide, which is the $600 every 6 months kind of thing. And then you should be thankful for that. And that's kind of people are giving into this notion. And then, of course, you watch the bureaucrats. They still go on eating sumptuously. They still go on celebrating. They even go to their vacation homes while you sit locked in your basement. So again, when governments try to merge the church and the state, that is a very dangerous thing. When governments try to subjugate the church to the state or the state to the church, we Christians say, no, that's terrible. There are theocratic organizations out in the world today, and they usually are not very tolerant, and they're usually not very merciful. So again, when you start to understand the realm of the role of the church and the state, you begin to realize the church is the merciful organization in the world. The church is the individual get yourself right with God organization, and how that then changes how you live life freely, virtuously for others. The state coerces us to follow the most basic outward manifestation of right and wrong. That's their role. Keep them separate for the sake of the church and the state. Keep them separate. So I guess Christmas Christian nation, yeah, because the Christmas Christian view of culture and government is that governments aren't to be grace, mercy, and peace. When I talk about soul, peace of your soul organizations, they're power coercing entities that are to be limited if they're to be a blessing in your life. So when they get out of their lane, and that's what's happening today. The government is way out of its lane in so many areas at which people would see that, of course, they're going to couch their work in terms of benevolence. They're going to say, well, we're doing this for you. We do this because we care about you. But nothing could be further from the truth when they finally have the power to do as they please. That's one of the things, again, when I looked in this COVID-19 relief bill, there is so much stuff in there that doesn't help American people. And they're spending our money to do it. And they're doing all these crazy things all around the world. And you're saying, in the middle of this pandemic in our country, why aren't they just focusing on the American people, on getting through this COVID-19 thing, getting the vaccine out, on the restaurants which are going under all over the place, on small mom and pop businesses, which are the centerpiece of our culture? Why aren't they focusing on that? And that's it. It shouldn't be 5,500 pages. You could do that in 3 pages. Well, you'd have to have lawyers speaking there, so maybe 50 pages. But it should be that focused. And when you start to see all this other stuff in there, you go, yep, that's how they think of us. They think of what, and we'll give you a little something to tide you over. So a couple of examples. Well, before I close today, just another couple books. There's 2 ways of dealing with some of the issues we're talking about today. One is this book. It's called, by Mary Eberstadt, It's Dangerous to Believe. And it talks about, the challenges for being a public Christian in our culture. And it's worth the read because it sets the stage. And again, it's going to be more punitive to be Christian. But like I've said before, that doesn't mean our light can't shine brightly in this world. And that's why I said the other book that I think is really something, and I really love Luke Goodrich's book on this, Free to Believe. And again, these are not theological works so much as they're practical. I mean, he's a lawyer who's writing theologically. I'm not saying that there's not good biblical theology in here, but he's trying to demonstrate practically what it means to be free to believe in this culture today. In fact, I say in this new year, you should be lifting up 2 crosses. I know there's only one ultimately, but 2 crosses. The Bladensburg cross, which is the event that actually the SCOTUS ruling, the Supreme Court ruling, that literally said that we can, have expressions of our Christian faith in this culture today. That was the Bladensburg cross issue and the Lemon test issue that we talked about. Lift that high, but of course, lift the cross of Christ higher, which is the eternal freedom that only He can give. So those couple of books, but a couple articles just to close our time together today. First one is hearing all these things about canceling Christmas. Isn't it amazing? Why you cannot cancel Christmas. That comes out of the Daily Wire. And Christmas is canceled. And this is, again, Boris Johnson is saying this, and so is Angela Merkel. And I know there's even some people talking that way. Actually, Jake Tapper said it too. Christmas is probably not going to be possible. Well, I love this quote. Whether uttered or alluded to by politicians or journalists, the phrase Christmas is canceled is beyond absurd. And I would say it absolutely is, because the Christmas message, which fought through all the nonsense of the 18th, 19th century, that finally comes to fruition, the 16th, 17th century comes to fruition in this constitutional separation and understanding of church and state. Christmas created the culture. And if the culture commits suicide, which in some sense it seems like it's doing, the Christmas message will actually shine even more brightly. But he's talking about how it's being intentionally eroded by a lot of our major voices in the culture. And I think that's fine. But what's interesting is he talks about how things are actually coming to this fruition, where you're having this watering down of Christianity, this rising of kind of the all-encompassing state. And then with COVID-19, they were able to come in and actually take control of life, and how this is a sad moment, but it's not going to cancel Christmas. That's beyond absurd. And at the very end, he says, so setting aside the blatant authoritarianism driving the destruction of freedom we have lazily grown to take for granted, Christmas isn't canceled simply because it cannot be canceled, no matter how hard people try. Absolutely. The other one is from the Wall Street Journal. It's called The Woke Christmas. And I like this one. This one's kind of like one of those things where it starts to say, hey, how should we approach some of these things? Oliver Cromwell tried to actually, eliminate Christmas too back in history. And he was talking about how Governor Gavin Newsom is not merely, he's not really in Cromwell's league when it comes to that. But the response to Cromwell's trying to cancel Christmas was Cotton Mather's Yuletide sermon. He said, the feast of Christ's nativity is to be spent in reveling, dicing, carding, masking, and in all licentious liberty by mad mirth, long eating, hard drinking, lewd gaming, rude reveling. Again, we don't want Puritanism and pietism. That kind of religiosity is not the religiosity of going forth with joy and mercy. Of course, all things in moderation. Don't interpret those words to be just. But his point is to just be overwhelmed with joy, overwhelmed with it, and to not let anything in this world steal that from you. And so he said the prospect of a good old Cotton Mather Yuletide is more fitting this year than ever. And so he talked about this is what's happening when you start merging church and state. It just as the divinely ordained rulers of the past, the theology of the modern woke ideology undergirds our political order, because they come at us as if they're being very spiritual, and they couch their takeover of our culture in language that talks about communitarian duty and sacrifice and obligation. But disobedience would not bring down the wrath of God. It will bring down the wrath of social media. So, like he said, like our early forebears, our modern Puritans don't seem to like the idea that you might be enjoying yourself. And so we would say again to this, revel in the rejoicing of the shepherds. I know that they probably got out of their lane that first Christmas night and started running around, and people said, you dirty shepherds, what are you doing in the city? And they said, we can't help but tell you the joy of what we have seen and what we have heard. So again, don't let them take this Christmas tide, Yuletide from you. And then finally, John MacArthur, when he was talking about losing our religion, I love what he said here, and this is something just to think. It's a serious note. They can't cancel Christmas. There's no doubt about that. And woke Christmas isn't Christmas. And so, we'll talk more about those kind of things in the new year, because that's going to be a philosophy we've got to deal with. But losing our religion, John MacArthur writes this. He said, the people that are talking about, dispensing with Christmas, dispensing with the church as if it's not an essential organization, they almost talk about it with pride that they're losing their religion. But the fact of the matter is, these same people who want justice, these same people who want equity, those are moral terms. And these are the people who are just trying to destroy the church with the notion there is no truth. So when Pilate says to Jesus, there is no truth, what is truth? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The Bible talks about the moral truths that are written in nature itself. These people are at war with the idea that there is such a truth. And yet, after they distinguish, if you will, or extinguish the church's voice in the culture, then they want to be the voice of truth. And the answer to them is to just turn their philosophy back on itself. What is truth? You don't have any foundation for truth. Once you actually leave the foundation of God creates the world, and there's a moral truth written in the fabric of who we are as human beings, that we all have moral consciences that are given to us by God, and that there's a higher authority. Once that's gone, there is no such thing as justice and equity. And that's what Nietzsche said. There's just power. And a lot of these people, that's really what they're about. They're about power. So what I guess MacArthur's saying is, in this milieu today, there is zero tolerance for religious faith in a culture like that. Why? Because there's zero tolerance for truth. And so today, I just, I want you to celebrate Christmas for all it's worth. Your culture needs you to do that, not just your family. Because when you lose your religion, as that song said, it almost sounds like, what an incredible thing. You're willing to lose your religion. Well, let me tell you, when you lose your religion, you're losing your soul. And when you lose your soul, you lose your country. You lose all the things that undergird, that flowed from this understanding that there was a God in heaven who was active in the world to preserve and to save it. You lose all of that. And I think that it's always interesting to me that people who say they're willing to lose that, boy, they grab back onto it when they need it most. I'll give you an example. when I was at the University of Michigan back in the day, we used to have these discussions in our class, and Christians were being kind of pummeled in their classes, in philosophy class, biology class, those kind of things. And we'd have these arguments in the dormitory. And one time, one guy said, I'm a Nietzschean, I believe that might is right, and, all that stuff, and God is dead. He went on to, he's waxing lyrical about this while he's, of course, sitting in his tastefully decorated room, eating sumptuously whatever he wants. But, he's going through all this, like, I'm willing to forego all this stuff. So I went and grabbed his stereo. I started walking out of his room with his stereo. And he said, what are you doing? You can't take that. That's mine. And I said, what do you mean it's yours? I like it. I'm going to take it. He said, well, it's mine. You can't take it. It's wrong. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. There is no right and wrong. There is no God, and I know I can take you. So I'm taking this. Yeah, again, that's the point. Christmas, Christian, we differentiate. We're not asking the government to preach Jesus, but if you really do understand the culture in which you live, the Christmas Christ child is the one who laid the foundation of the differentiation of church and state. Now, albeit he put the state on the bottom and the church on the top, in the way of thinking, because God's salvation is the ultimate good news for the world. And our founding fathers reflected that when they bound the government and set the individual religious, virtuous living person free. And of course, most of those folks were Christians. So while a government can't be Christian, people can be, and the government can follow the biblical Judeo-Christian moral view of things, which ours was founded on. And those moral things, which are not ultimately or uniquely Christian, because there's a lot of people who celebrate these moral truths. Honor your father and your mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. All those things, yes, absolutely. And know that there's a God in heaven who holds all things accountable. There's a lot of people who believe that besides Christians. And a culture can actually regularize the outward expression of those things so that we can live civilly and humanely with each other. All that can be done. So again, today, this Christmas, celebrate what only God can do in your life, in your family, and then be that kind of voice that takes Christ's, give to Caesar what is Caesar's perspective, give to God what is God's perspective, out into this culture. And then do one more. Tell the state the same thing that Jesus told it, which is you have no authority except that which is given for you from above. So this Christmas, after you're done celebrating and reveling in the birth of Jesus Christ, which brings real hope to the world, no matter what's going on in the world, and then you tell the state to stay in its lane. Tell the state, your job is to help undergird moral foundations that are vital to a healthy society. Your job is to actually clarify these rules that we all have to abide by. Equal access, not equal outcome. The moral laws of the Christian worldview are not unique to Christianity. There are a lot of religious traditions that celebrate these same moral worldviews, and that's why this differentiation can create a tolerant nation, unlike any other in history. So if you have the moral laws of the Judeo-Christian worldview coupled with the differentiation, the healthy differentiation of the church and the state and their roles, you can have, which is what we have, the most prosperous, tolerant nation, just nation in the whole world, compared to other nations. I'm not saying compared to utopia, which is what people do today, but compared to other nations. And it's something we should pray for, give thanks to God for, celebrate. And then no matter what's happening, if all things start to crumble around us, in the darkness, the Christmas star shines more brightly even then. In closing, I would just say, a lot of time when you say things like Merry Christmas, I've said it all on the bottom there. It's been scrolling. All we mean by Merry Christmas to those of you who aren't Christians is God bless you. And in this time of year, we have a special way of saying that. I guess when I think about people saying, well, that's intolerant. Well, when people say to me things like, well, Namaste Day, or when my friend next door, when I went like this to him one day. Hey, Robbie, great to see you. And he went like this. He goes, oh, you believe this too? And I said, what did I do? He goes, the Spirit in me, bless the Spirit in you. I didn't, if reverse it. When he said that, I didn't take offense to that. I don't believe the same thing he means by the Spirit in me. In fact, I want to tell him about the Holy Spirit who actually blesses both of us, but I didn't take offense. I saw the joy in his wishing me well, or in the greeting that comes from another culture that wishes me well. And I think, if you reverse this and you don't take offense, then I think saying Merry Christmas, we should just say there's no offense taken. I'm not going to let a certain group of people who just can't stand Christmas destroy our ability to share Christmas with others. So as you say Merry Christmas, say it with a sparkle in your eye and a joy in your heart and a willingness to help your neighbor, even if your neighbor doesn't always agree with you on a lot of things. If you have that kind of joyous spirit, that greeting will be something that is ultimately welcomed in your life and in their life as well. So let's just try to rise up to that level of greeting as we move forward. So again, I hope these things help give you some perspective. I think it's ironic that the Christmas star is showing itself in 2020 when everyone's predicting gloom and doom, and yet here it comes, and it just says, I'm still here. I'm still active in the world today. And I just find it was kind of an interesting thing. Look for that light. Actually be the salt and the light that God has given you to be. So till we see him face to face, speak the truth in love with humility and grace, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And till next time, God richly bless you always.